This is the blue hole of Santa Rosa. On the surface, it looks like nothing, just an unassuming, circular pond sitting quietly in the middle of the New Mexico desert. The water is a brilliant, striking shade of deep blue, crystal clear against the pale dirt and scattered brush of Route 66. To the locals and the thousands of tourists who pass by every year, it's a refreshing oasis, a great spot to cool off or take a casual dive. But if you dive down to the bottom, past the boulders, past the forgotten debris, past the strange silence, you'll find something that completely changes the nature of the place. A heavy, industrial metal grate is bolted directly over a jagged opening in the rock. Grates like this don't appear in nature. They aren't installed for decoration. They are put there for one terrifying reason: to keep people out of a place where people have already died. In this video, we're going to look at the history of the blue hole of Santa Rosa, at the horrifying incidents that forced authorities to seal it away, and the terrifying reality of what happens when you decide to deliberately bypass the grate. Before we get into it, I want to give a serious claustrophobia warning for this story. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. 100 miles east of Albuquerque, New Mexico, sits the small city of Santa Rosa. Right on the edge of town runs the historic Route 66, one of the original highways of America, dating back to the 1920s. Long before the asphalt was laid down, long before tourists drove across the desert in search of roadside attractions, this spot was a lifeline. For centuries, maybe even millennia, native populations used this deep water hole as a constant, reliable source of life. Later, it served as a watering hole for cattle and weary travelers crossing the brutal expanse of the American Southwest. The reason it never ran dry comes down to a rare geological phenomenon. It is a natural artesian well. Deep within the earth, massive underground aquifers are kept under immense pressure. That pressure forces water upward at unbelievable volumes. The blue hole has a constant, unyielding inflow of 3,000 gallons per minute. That is enough water to completely fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool in under 3 hours. Every 6 hours, every single drop of water in the basin is completely replaced by fresh, cold water welling up from the deep. Because of this constant cycle, the water remains at a steady, chilling 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and the visibility is almost supernatural. At the surface, the pool is about 80 feet in diameter. But as you descend, the geography changes. It narrows like an hourglass, then balloons back out at the bottom to nearly 130 feet across. For recreational scuba divers, it's a dream. There are no ocean currents, no unpredictable tides. It's essentially a giant, perfectly clear vertical swimming pool. Except, it isn't just a pool. At the bottom of that 80-foot drop, scattered among the rubble and boulders, lies a small, unassuming opening on the eastern wall. And inside that opening lies a sprawling, suffocating labyrinth of underwater caves. Most people look at it and keep their distance. But curiosity is a powerful thing. And long ago, before anyone understood the true peril of the maze below, that curiosity proved fatal. In March of 1976, a group of 10 students and their instructor from the University of Oklahoma pulled into the parking lot of the blue hole.
All right, everyone, let's review our dive plan. Check your regulators and buddy up.
This water looks incredible!
Remember, stay together and follow my lead.
They were there to take advantage of the crystal clear conditions to do some underwater photography for a class project. Among them were 2 students named Mike and David. Before anyone entered the water, the instructor laid down the law. Everyone was told not to stay at the bottom for too long, and given one absolute, non-negotiable rule. Under no circumstances should anyone enter the cave on the eastern side. For most of the students, the warning was enough. But for David and Mike, the dark opening at the bottom wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. At around 10:30 a.m., the group descended. While the others explored the open basin, David and Mike drifted toward the bottom. They hovered over the 4-foot opening. After a few moments of hesitation, they looked at each other, nodded, and swam inside. Right away, the environment changed entirely. The friendly, open water vanished. The tunnel descended straight down for about 15 feet into a tight, jagged corridor. The walls were rough, the floor was composed of loose sand, and the water quickly lost its pristine clarity. At the base of the drop, the cave split off into a maze of dark rooms and narrow corridors. This is the hidden danger of unmapped cave systems. Without specialized training, a diver's fins will inevitably disturb the fine silt resting on the bottom. Because you're looking forward, focusing on the exploration, you don't even realize you're doing it. You're kicking up a microscopic cloud of dust that hangs suspended in the dead water behind you. By the time David and Mike decided they had seen enough and turned around to leave, the way out was completely gone. From their vantage point, there was no exit, just a thick, impenetrable wall of gray silt. When you enter a silt out, you lose all sense of direction. Up, down, left, right, it all becomes the same shade of nothing. This is where panic sets in. It's a physical sensation, a cold pit in the stomach that tells you everything is wrong. Your breathing rate spikes. You start hyperventilating. You draw on your air supply twice as fast, moving blindly through the dark, banging against unseen walls and ceilings. And then, terrifyingly, you take a breath and the regulator gives you nothing. The air is gone. Back at the surface, the remaining students and the instructor realized too much time had passed. The search began that very afternoon. Rescue divers dropped down into the cave, running a 100-foot safety line to ensure they wouldn't get lost in the dust. Even with the line, the search was a nightmare. The cave was so cramped that rescue divers could only go in one at a time. The depth, the pitch black, and the shifting walls made it one of the most grueling recovery operations the region had ever seen. For days later, after water conditions deteriorated and safety risks grew too high, the search was temporarily called off. Shortly after, local authorities made a decision. A massive 300-pound metal grate was lowered over the entrance, bolted down to ensure no one else could ever swim inside. Weeks later, when the grate was temporarily lifted for further investigation, David's body was finally found. The blue hole had claimed its first victims, and the state locked the door. For nearly 40 years, the grate remained rusted shut. The secrets of the cave were left in total darkness. Decades passed. Cave diving technology evolved radically. Equipment became safer, lighting became brighter, and mapping software allowed explorers to chart spaces previously thought impossible. In 2013, a prominent diving organization known as the ADM Exploration Foundation approached the city of Santa Rosa. They wanted permission to do something that hadn't been done in nearly half a century: remove the grate, map the cave, and document what lay beneath. After years of permits, planning, and safety reviews, the project was approved. In 2016, a team of elite technical divers arrived at the site. The man chosen to lead the exploration was a legendary, highly experienced cave diver named Mike Young. When they finally unbolted the heavy metal grate, they discovered something unexpected. Unbeknownst to the city, decades prior, construction crews had dumped tons of rock and debris near the opening. Before anyone could even step inside, the team had to spend days dredging the bottom, hauling out mud and stone just to clear a pathway. Even after clearing the debris, a massive, multi-ton boulder blocked the main choke point. It took 3 grueling years of careful excavation before the way was finally safe enough to enter. By March 2016, the path was clear. Mike Young and another veteran diver, a former Navy diver named Shane Thompson, descended into the abyss to begin mapping. What they found inside was far worse than anyone anticipated. After dropping past 140 feet, the cave was no longer just a series of limestone tunnels. It was entirely choked with colossal boulders, some the size of cars, piled on top of one another like a game of geological pickup sticks. The divers had to squeeze through razor-thin cracks, often scraping their tanks against jagged rock faces where there wasn't even enough room to turn around. Every movement risked dislodging stones that weighed hundreds of pounds. Up until the final days of the expedition, only Mike had managed to squeeze past the tightest restriction at 140 feet. But on March 26th, Wanting to finish the mapping process, Shane managed to slip through the restriction as well. They were deep inside the most dangerous section of the cave, and they were about to run out of time. The plan for that final dive was simple. They were at a depth of roughly 195 feet. Mike, being the more experienced of the two, was going to push through the final tight restriction to retrieve a fixed safety line. Shane was instructed to wait behind a pre-agreed boulder. Mike squeezed through the final crack, pulling himself forward by his arms in the pitch-black void. He reached the end of the line, but paused. He realized that they were filming a documentary about the expedition, and Shane was wearing a camera. Instead of cutting the line right away, Mike decided to turn back, grab Shane, and have him film the final extraction. It was a split-second decision, one that sealed their fate. When Mike turned around, the water was already thick with silt. He inched his way back through the narrow restriction. But before he could reach the designated waiting spot, he slammed directly into someone in the dark. It was Shane. Against their explicit plan, Shane had grown impatient. He had decided to follow right behind Mike through 5 consecutive tight restrictions. And now he was wedged. Shane was completely stuck in a space barely wider than his shoulders, and panic was setting in. Mike realized the gravity of the situation instantly. He backed out of the opening, grabbed Shane by his gear, and pulled with every ounce of strength he had. He felt like he was going to break Shane's legs in the process, but he managed to wrench him free and turn him around toward the exit. They began moving blindly through the silt-churned maze, following the guideline by touch. Then, suddenly, the line was ripped from Mike's hands. Shane, in a blind panic, had yanked forward violently, tearing the lifeline away. In an instant, Mike was cast adrift in absolute darkness, surrounded by unstable boulders and zero visibility. Most people would have panicked, but Mike had decades of experience. He forced himself to stop, control his breathing, and wait. He knew his air supply would last if he kept his head. After calming his heart rate, Mike began patting the rock walls, searching in the dark. Miraculously, his fingers brushed against the line. Relief flooded over him. He grabbed it and began moving forward again. A moment later, he felt a hand reaching frantically through a gap in the boulders. It was Shane. The panic had completely consumed him. When Shane found a larger opening, he lunged through it so recklessly that he wedged himself underneath Mike. His head at Mike's feet, Mike's head at his. They were completely locked together. In a chaotic struggle, Shane's flailing fins kicked out, striking a valve on Mike's thoracic. The valve shattered, and freezing water began pouring into Mike's suit, soaking him to the bone. Fighting for his own survival, Mike wedged his leg into a crevice, using it as leverage to pry the space open just enough for Shane to wriggle free. But the violent release pushed Mike forward, tearing one of his fins completely off his foot and throwing him deeper into the restriction. Once again, Mike had to sit in the freezing dark, alone, forcing his breathing to slow down while water filled his suit. Miraculously, he found his lost fin lying on a rock. He found the line again. Knowing Shane was still somewhere ahead in the dust, Mike pushed forward, turning back into the horror to help his partner. As he swam down the line, the tension vanished. The rope went completely limp. Mike pushed through the final boulders and found Shane. It was already too late. Trapped by the physical exhaustion, the hyperventilation, and the overwhelming panic, Shane had burned through his primary rebreather system, exhausted his emergency gas, and succumbed to the water. With his suit partially flooded with freezing water and facing a mandatory 2-hour decompression stop just to reach the surface, Mike made the agonizing decision. He left Shane where he was, followed the line out through the labyrinth, and surfaced to notify the authorities. The camera footage recovered from the expedition later painted a heartbreaking picture of how fast things go wrong in an environment like that. Driven by curiosity and a moment of impatience, a mapping mission turned into a fight for survival. Following the tragedy, the cave was fully mapped, but the cost was simply too high. Explorers and local authorities agreed that the shifting, multi-ton boulders, the tight restrictions, and the unpredictable nature of the system made it one of the most perilous underwater caves on Earth. The exploration ended. The divers packed up their gear, And once again, a heavy metal grate was lowered, bolted down securely, sealing the dark maze away from the world. Today, the Blue Hole of Santa Rosa remains a bright, clear, popular spot for swimmers and casual divers enjoying the desert sun. On the surface, it's a peaceful oasis along Route 66. Just don't look too closely at the bottom.